here's some of the details that are important as to, what happens next. You need to have your name in the transfer portal by May 1 in order to be eligible for the fall. So are we about to see just like everything go crazy here in the next couple weeks as players decide to capitalize on the one-time transfer rule? Again, coaches, players, all those around college football have been anticipating that this one-time transfer rule will pass. It will go into effect immediately. Again, if you want to be eligible for the fall, you need to have your name in the transfer portal. And because it's a one-time transfer rule, it needs to be your first opportunity to transfer. So we've discussed it a little bit within the broader context of, the way things have been changing for players in terms of NCAA bylaws and legislation. But now that the rule has gone into effect and it has become part of our reality in college football, real quickly, I mean, what do you think is next? And what are some of your predictions or what are you anticipating with the one-time transfer rule now on the books?
I don't know how, I think once the transfer portal became a thing, we saw the number of transfers really spike, like a large leap in players entering the portal, at least interested in possibly transferring. I don't know if this rule now passing is going to have as dramatic a change as that did, because I feel like we're already a few years into it, and I feel like the NCAA has been dragging its feet on it for so long. I mean, like, we're already seeing in college basketball a really busy transfer portal with the anticipation that this rule change was going to come. So everybody kind of anticipated this. And I think in football, there'd already been a lot of that from players who had already entered the portal after last season with the anticipation that this rule was going to pass. And now that spring practice is ending, we typically see in any given year a lot of players who have gone through a couple weeks of practice with their team and now realize where they are on the depth chart and where their role is, enter the transfer portal. So I don't think we're going to see some huge increase in cases. What I think we're going to see are fewer instances of Lincoln Riley and coaches like complaining about players transferring within conference, because now they really won't have a say in it.
Oh, I think it's just the beginning, though. I know in basketball for a while it was doubling. Football is doubling the number of players that enter the transfer portal. At some time it can't keep doubling or you catch up to everybody, right? So right. I wonder what the settling number will be. I mean, it'll be thousands. I don't know what the latest one. I found one from February, but I feel like even since February 2nd, it would be up from 1,500. That was the number there, which is double the number that we had last year. I wonder where it stops. I'm concerned about it, but at the same time, I loved watching what Joe Burrow did at LSU. Yes. And I loved watching what Kyler Murray did at Oklahoma and Jalen Hurts did at Oklahoma. And, the list is pretty lengthy of programs. I'm looking forward to watching Mackenzie Milton at Florida State. Like, there's a long list of players, successful stories that have actually helped programs. I do think there are far more that don't benefit, but you don't read about them because they're not the big names. But I have a question for you guys. Do you think, because I have a prediction, I don't think this is going to satisfy people. The one-time freebie. Like, I think it's like a lot of things in our society. Like, once you kind of get your way, like the pendulum swings pretty wide and then it stays there. I don't think we've gone far enough of player empowerment yet, because one of the biggest things I heard was, well, coaches can hop from job to job. They can leave the program. Well, guess what? A lot of those coaches leave multiple programs and they do it after just 1 year. So I wonder in 5 years if we're still evaluating this and you'll still see players complaining, saying, well, I wasn't happy. It didn't work out for me. I want to try. And we've already seen players transfer multiple times, and there's some success stories there too. There's some ugly, but I just wonder if this is enough. The name, image, and likeness in this, is this enough? Is this it? Like, is this the player empowerment movement, or are there still drastic changes to come on the horizon? Because I feel like we're still going to keep going down this path.
Oh, there'll be more changes coming. It's just like anything. I think like you said, right now it's like, ooh, all right, cool. They get to move once, first time freebie. Ooh, no, you're out. But that will definitely eventually become, well, they should be able to move multiple times if they want. As long as they have eligibility remaining, they should be able to do what anybody else is able to do. Just like coaches. And just like we see with the playoff. Well, we start with 2. We'll move to 4. We move to 8. Or just like we see with replay review in sports. Well, we'll start with just this. Oh, wait, now we'll add this. Well, what if we start reviewing this? It's the disease of more. It's always going to keep changing, where it's never going to be enough. But I think that's been the case with sports forever. It's just now we're entering more into a player empowerment era of the changes and the continued evolving, evolution of sport as it is.
If I can do that reckless thing where I mention an area that I have no idea how it works, but just like broadly say that I would like to see it fixed. If there's another step, I don't know what it would be, but it would be on the health and safety front, and mainly for protections, right? Like some sort of like health insurance type protections, or some sort of safety net. And I don't know exactly the way that those systems are set up right now for student athletes, but in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, player movement, right? Okay, that's going to be one thing. That is the first level box. Number 2, name, image, and likeness. Okay, that is that's another box. And I think that on the health and safety box, that's where you try to create some sort of opportunity such that if you do have catastrophic or life-changing injuries participating in college athletics, that there is some system set up such that you can receive support. And again, I just like in the same way that people are like, oh, healthcare is broken, fix it. And they don't actually provide any opportunities or any ideas. I don't have the ideas here, but to answer your question, Danny, I think that is the next step, or another step that you could take in terms of this player movement, would be being able to negotiate or being able to receive some sort of support on the health and safety standpoint that might extend beyond your eligibility, right? That might extend beyond the time that you leave. And so I'm not sure how you fund it. I'm not sure how it looks like, but I do think that that's a discussion worth continuing without saying that it's like us being gluttonous and just wanting the disease of more to continue.
Another interesting aspect of this that I think doesn't really get mentioned is the way that the fan experience is going to change. Because if you think about college sports and the relationship between fans and the schools that they root for, there's the natural one of, I went to school there, I care about the school, and therefore I care about the sports teams. But then there's also just fans who don't really have any association with the school other than, I grew up in the area, I liked college sports, and this is the school that I chose to root for. But like, you see it when you get to like a passionate college football fan is following, like, from recruiting, they're following these kids in high school, following the recruitment of them to their school. And it's kind of a situation where you would watch a kid in high school, he'd commit to your school, then you'd watch him go through 3 or 4 years, depending on what, 5 years, 6 years sometimes. And then they would move on, and you'd kind of, the churn, they'd keep coming. But now we're going to see a situation, and I think college basketball fans are kind of already there with it, because the roster turnover there is so great considering the difference in the size of the rosters, where the churn from season to season is completely different. Like it used to be with a college basketball team, you'd get the kid as a freshman. There'd be a couple one and dones and guys who'd leave for the NBA early, but you'd basically watch the kid grow up from freshman to senior day, move on, blah, blah, blah. Now, like every single year, half the roster is new players because of transfers from schools. And we're going to start seeing that now more in football. We kind of already have, but it's just going to be on a larger scale with, 85 scholarships per team. So I wonder how that is going to impact the fan experience with the teams. I wonder if there's going to be less of a personal connection. And I wonder what possibly that could have with, what kind of ramifications that could have for the sport in the long haul. And I wonder, like, with like the recruiting industry, are fans going to really pay close attention to as close attention to high school recruiting as they have been, knowing that kid might just leave a year later if he doesn't play right away?
Or yeah,
they
will. I don't.
I'm telling you, maybe not immediately, but if it becomes more of where it's constant, where players are constantly leaving and they're able to take advantage of this, I think you're going to see less of a personal connection between fans and the players. It's going to be more about.
But see, this has always been my argument about why players won't be as marketable. I do think the true college football fan roots for their school.
Mm-hmm.
They don't root for the players as individual. Now, if that player's wearing that Clemson jersey, then yeah, I'm all in. And I do think there were some Bama fans that appreciated Jalen Hurts, and I think they rooted for him when he went to Oklahoma, but they're diehard Crimson Tide fans through and through. Like, I don't think they're going to lose their affinity for Alabama because a couple players leave the program. I think that's what makes college football special. And if you're right, that scares me. Like, if you're right, and I think college basketball has been devastated by the one and done, and before that by allowing player, when you can't even hardly get up to speed with who's on your roster, and then all of a sudden you fall in love with a Zion Williamson and he's gone after a year. I think that would get tired. That would get tiring, and you'd get kind of like, But I still think Duke basketball fans are still just as crazed about Duke. I think the top 20, top 25 programs in the country that have rabid fan bases, I don't think they're going to lose any of their passion. Now, there have been some fans that do not like the player empowerment movement for whatever reason. It's a little bit weird. Like, why wouldn't you want these young men to succeed in whatever they do and wherever they go? And who cares if they make some money in their pocket? But I've seen some people say, well, if they get paid, I'm not watching.
That's not true.
I don't think so either.
Colin, your bluff.
I remember when everybody stopped watching the NFL a couple years ago too. Yet they just signed a really huge new TV deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys? So let me just talk about, because I think another question for you guys, because these are some of my concerns. Because I was against this firmly 7 or 8 years ago, and now I'm full circle. I'm like, you might as well embrace it. Anything you guys think there should be any restrictions put on this as far as when to contact, when you can enter? Because I think there should be some restrictions as far as, like, you can't enter it during the season, mid-season. If you do, you're not allowed to be contacted. Coaches complain, and I think the biggest reason coaches complain, yes, it's going to make their job more difficult, and nobody feels bad for coaches making millions of dollars. But how do you coach a player that you're kind of worried in the back of your mind, if I yell at him or I bench him or I take him out of this drill because he's having an awful practice and deserves it, or he's having a horrible performance and deserves it, but you're kind of nervous that he's still in contact with a school that was recruiting him 6 months ago? Like the recruiting off the rosters, I can't stand. And yet that is where I think is changing just as dramatically as the actual portal itself. Hey, we have a guy that was a part of this podcast that I'm sure is out there perusing rosters right now. Oh, you were a 3 or 4 star. You're not getting that playing time over there in Tennessee. Well, come on down the road to Nashville. We'll got opportunity for you. And I understand that aspect of it, but I think there's a time and a place for it. But again, how do you police it? And going back to the coaches argument, well, it happens with coaches. Their agents talk to people. They talk to other schools while they're on the program. So I don't know if there's a solution to it, kind of like Chip's issue with, player, benefits.
I wonder if, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, I don't know what kind of rules or regulations I would put on it right off the top of my head. I think ethically I'm against it, but like, just as a personal fan wise, just for keeping things, just the natural desire to keep things as they are, then yeah, I think there should be. But I wonder, like, maybe there could be like a time window, like you said, there is. But I'm talking about there's only a certain amount of time where you can enter the portal, like from May 1st to August 1st.
It's based on for fall and winter sports. You've got a May 1 deadline to enter the transfer portal and be immediately eligible for the coming season.
Okay.
There's still kind of
not just for this year. That's going to be a permanent thing.
Spring athletes will have a July 1 deadline in order to gain immediate eligibility. And I see that as basically a semester-based approach, right? Like your semester ends, you got to at least be in the transfer portal by May 1 if you want to get that immediate eligibility through the one-time transfer rule. And then if you're a spring athlete, then July 1 gives you, a little bit more time. I think that those are going to be in place the rest of the way.
But like, I wish there was a starting window, because who's to say a player in November,
that's what I was,
he gets benched and he's like, oh, I'm pissed, I'm going straight to the portal, announces on Twitter and is there. And then all of a sudden, like, that's where I don't want that, because that will be a distraction. I'll hate it. A lot of fans will hate it. And that'll be a talking point. Like, I wish it was, all right, soon as,
Kelly Bryant did that. Because then we get the 4-game redshirt rule where you're trying to make sure that you transfer within the first 4 games.
But I don't want to have that situation arise again, because I feel like Kelly Bryant had a lot of vitriol thrown his way, and you could potentially avoid a situation like that, but it prevents you from an opportunity. Like, he was able to go and become eligible faster and start playing. But I do think it's going to open you up to scrutiny that, hey, if you want to undergo that. But I also think there's some decisions made in haste during a season. Like, see if you can, especially for freshmen and sophomores. Like, you're a freshman, you're tired, you're mentally battered, you're not playing like you thought. Like, you could make an emotional decision in that moment where maybe it doesn't change anything in 2 or 3 months, but at least you have a little perspective that may change after a year.
Yeah. So, like, can they figure out a way to approach the transfer portal, or whatever the hell they want to call it from this point forward, kind of like they do the recruiting cycle, where there are dead periods? There are, like, there's a recruiting calendar of what you can and can't do at certain times of year. Do we eventually see this evolve to where the same thing is happening with transfers, where you can enter the portal during this time of year, you can talk to other schools during this time of year, you have to be in by this time of year, you have to pull back by this date, that kind of thing?
I would like that. I think that I would support that. And I imagine coaches who are very used to the recruiting calendar, I imagine that they would too. And I guess maybe like my one sort of lingering thing on this in terms of, is this enough? I think that one thing that this eliminates is the confusion about the waiver process, where over the last 4 to 5 years, a lot of waivers have been given out, but at the same time, some haven't. And it was just a really frustrating process in terms of with the schools, the players' families, fans trying to figure out whether or not somebody's going to be able to get cleared, going to be able to be eligible. And so at least for that first transfer, now we've taken that out. We've taken all that uncertainty away, and that's no longer a hiccup that anyone has to do. Like, when I think about the one-time transfer rule, I immediately was like, yeah, well, I mean, players had figured out enough reasons to be able to almost have the one-time transfer rule exist. You just had to have the resources to get the right lawyer to put together your case, because we've heard from the NCAA side of things that the way the paperwork is put together from player to player is wildly different and often ends up dictating whether or not you're able to get eligibility. So